SCP-173, the sculpture. The true horror of SCP-173 isn't found in what it does, but in the agonizing physical pressure it places on the human body. The simple, inevitable necessity to blink. Inside a sterile containment vault of reinforced concrete, this 6'7" entity remains a motionless, crude statue of rebar and spray paint. However, the moment your eyelids close for even a fraction of a second, the heavy friction of concrete grinding against the floor signals that it has lunged forward. By the time your eyes reopen, you aren't looking at a statue anymore. You are staring directly into a face stained with a disturbing mixture of blood and feces that the entity generates out of thin air. While many assume it's just a fast-moving killer, the psychological terror lies in its absolute stillness while being watched. It is a cold, calculated game of red light, green light, where your gaze is the only barrier preventing your neck from being snapped with the force of a breaking dry branch. Weighing roughly 1,300 pounds, it moves with a silent, impossible velocity that defies every known law of physics. The most chilling realization is that it doesn't kill for food or survival, but seemingly out of a compulsive, artistic necessity to end life. One synchronized blink from a group is a death sentence, as this creature can close a 20-foot gap in less than 0.1 seconds. SCP-3008, the Infinite IKEA. The moment you step through those automatic glass doors, the exit behind you doesn't just lock, it vanishes. You are now a permanent resident of a liminal purgatory where aisles of Scandinavian furniture stretch for billions of square miles, far beyond the geographical limits of Earth. This isn't a retail space, it's a warped dimension where the fluorescent humming of the overhead lights is the only sound in a vast artificial wasteland. People have survived here for years, scavenging Swedish meatballs that inexplicably restock themselves. Yet no one has ever found a map that leads back to the sun. The terror truly begins when the lights flicker out. The staff, entities standing over 7 feet tall with limbs that have too many joints, begin their patrol. Their faces are smooth, featureless expanses of skin looking like unfinished clay models or melted wax that was forced into a human uniform. They don't hunt with malice. They simply process you for being in the store after hours, their massive, blunt hands capable of crushing a human skull like an overripe fruit. Survivors huddle in fortresses made of cardboard boxes and Kivik sofas, listening to the rhythmic, heavy footsteps of these faceless giants. The most soul-crushing discovery found in Journals of the Lost is that some victims have walked for 100 miles in a single direction, only to find a duplicate of the exact same cafeteria they started in, proving the exit isn't just hidden, it's a cruel, geometric lie. But if an infinite store is your nightmare, wait until you meet the doctor who thinks your very existence is a disease. SCP-049, the Plague Doctor. In a quiet village, the local police find a series of bodies that have been reanimated with crude black surgical thread. SCP-049 possesses the elegant, scholarly poise of a medieval healer, speaking with a calm, melodic voice that feels disturbingly professional. He is polite, highly intelligent, and driven by a singular, obsessive goal: to cure what he calls the pestilence. To the doctor, every human he encounters is a patient suffering from an invisible terminal decay that only he can detect. But his mercy is more terrifying than any disease. A single touch from his gloved hand causes every biological function to cease instantly, leaving the victim dead before they even hit the cold floor. The true stomach-churning horror is revealed when you realize that SCP-049 isn't actually wearing a costume. Those tattered black robes and the iconic white bird-like mask are not fabric or ceramic. They are living, calcified extensions of his own body, a shell of hardened skin and bone that grew directly over his internal organs like a permanent suit of armor. When he decides you are infected, he produces jagged, archaic medical tools from a leather bag that seems to hold more equipment than physics should allow. He then performs a frantic, bloody surgery on the fresh corpse, sewing unknown chemicals into the muscle fibers to save the soul. What remains is a shambling, lobotomized puppet that follows his every command. He is so utterly convinced of his own righteousness that he will hold your hand and offer gentle words of comfort while his rusted needles pierce your eyes, completely oblivious to the fact that his cure is a fate 1,000 times worse than death itself. SCP-096, the Shy Guy 4 Pixels. That is the margin between a normal life and a gruesome end. A hiker in a silent forest takes a photo, unaware that a blurry speck in the background contains the face of SCP-096. Almost instantly, 1,000 miles away, a pale creature begins to wail in a high-pitched tone, a sound mimicking a human in a terminal mental breakdown. This isn't just a hunt, it is a relentless biological homing missile programmed to erase a witness from reality. Standing 7 feet 10 inches tall with skeletal arms reaching nearly 5 feet, this entity is a nightmare of malnutrition weighing only 100 pounds, but do not let its fragile frame fool you. No steel wall, no ocean depth, and no lead-lined bunker can stop its momentum once triggered. The horror is purely psychological. SCP-096 is so insecure about its appearance that it enters a state of uncontrollable rage the moment its face is perceived. Its jaw can unhinge and stretch up to 4 times the width of a human's, revealing a dark, bottomless gullet designed to consume and delete. You can hide in a submarine at the bottom of the Atlantic, but it will swim through the crushing pressures and rip through several inches of titanium hull just to get to you. There is no negotiation, and survival is a mathematical impossibility. The most chilling detail in the Foundation's archives is the total silence after the kill. Once it reaches its target, it doesn't just murder, it leaves behind no biological trace, not a bone fragment, drop of blood, or strand of DNA, as if the person was systematically redacted from existence. It then returns to its corner to sob, waiting for the next witness to glance at a photograph taken 3 miles away. SCP-106, the Old Man. The first sign of his arrival isn't a sound, but a smell, the cloying, acidic stench of stagnant rot. You notice a dark, oily smudge on your wallpaper that spreads with impossible speed, eating through the drywall like a parasitic fungus. This is the calling card of SCP-106, a decayed humanoid that looks like a corpse recovered from a flooded grave after decades of immersion. He doesn't run. He doesn't need to. He simply steps through the solid floorboards of your living room, leaving a trail of black, corrosive slime that dissolves steel and bone alike. His primary weapon isn't strength, but a terrifying mastery over matter that allows him to vanish into any solid surface, dragging his prey with him into a realm where the laws of physics are rewritten by a sadistic mind. Once he pulls you into his pocket dimension, your nightmare has only just begun. This is a distorted reality of endless corridors and rust-covered chambers where SCP-106 is an absolute god. Within this space, time is bent into a cruel, agonizing loop, allowing the entity to methodically dismantle your body and play with your limbs for years while only seconds pass in the outside world. He isn't interested in a quick kill. He prefers to wound his victims, letting them wander through his shifting maze of shadows before reappearing to harvest another part of them. The most disturbing aspect is the sheer age of the residue he leaves behind. Lab analysis shows the black mucus is a biological secretion that causes near-instant cellular necrosis, liquefying healthy tissue on contact. You aren't just his prey, you are a living toy intended to last as long as his twisted patience allows. SCP-610, the Flesh That Hates. In a remote sector of southern Siberia, there is a scar on the earth that covers more than 20 square miles of frozen wasteland. But the ground here isn't frozen. It is warm, pulsing, and covered in a carpet of wet, heaving skin. SCP-610 is a contagious skin malady that doesn't just kill its host. It rewrites their genetic code to turn them into a biological building block for a massive collective organism. The infection begins with a simple rash, but within hours, the victim's skin becomes as tough as scarred leather and begins to split open, revealing a network of raw, twitching muscle underneath. There is no cure, no vaccine, and no mercy for those who breathe in the microscopic spores that drift through the stagnant air of the infected zones. The true horror of 610 lies in the final stages of the transformation, where the human form is discarded entirely. In the deeper levels of the infected villages, the remains of the inhabitants have fused together into towering pillars of meat and bone. You might see a victim whose head is split vertically down the middle, not to kill them, but to allow a cluster of pus-filled sentient meat tentacles to burst forth, reaching out to drag nearby uninfected life into the fold. These tentacles act as sensory organs, tasting the air for the scent of clean DNA to corrupt. The infection keeps the victim's brain partially functional, forcing them to remain conscious as their limbs are stretched, liquefied, and refused into grotesque, multi-legged shapes that scuttle across the landscape. The entire region has become a single, thinking sea of gore that shares a collective nervous system, meaning every scream uttered by a newly infected soul is felt by every other pulse of meat across the entire 20-mile radius. SCP-035, the Possessive Mask. Inside a high-security containment vault isolated by multiple layers of lead-shielded steel sits a seemingly simple white porcelain comedy mask. Yet its presence is so biologically toxic that it requires a specialized glass case thick enough to stop a high-caliber sniper round. SCP-035 is an ancient, sentient entity that constantly secretes a black, highly corrosive, and degenerative substance from its eye and mouth holes. This fluid is so potent that it can eat through 2 inches of tempered glass in a matter of minutes, requiring a high-pressure drainage system to prevent a catastrophic containment breach. However, the physical destruction it causes is merely a shallow distraction from its true terrifying power, a telepathic influence that targets the deepest, most hidden psychological vulnerabilities of the human psyche. Researchers stationed near its chamber, even those behind soundproof barriers, often report vivid auditory hallucinations, claiming to hear the muffled, desperate cries of their own children or the persuasive whispers of a long-lost friend. The mask doesn't just communicate, it masterfully manipulates the chemicals in your brain to create a state of absolute mindless subservience. Once a person is coerced into putting the mask on, their own consciousness is instantly and violently extinguished, replaced by a brilliant but sadistic ancient intellect. The entity then begins a horrific process of forcing the host body to perform brutal, self-destructive acts, literally burning through the person's life force to fuel its own physical movements like a parasite consuming a battery. It will calmly explain its complex nihilistic philosophical views while the host's skin sloughs off in massive bloody sheets due to the corrosive bile leaking from the porcelain. It is a master deceiver that views every human being as nothing more than disposable biological shells to be used, broken, and discarded in its eternal, silent quest for absolute freedom from its glass cage. SCP-682, the hard-to-destroy reptile. The Foundation has successfully contained ancient gods and rewritten global history, yet they remain powerless against a single hateful creature. SCP-682 is a massive reptilian entity possessing a level of biological immortality that defies every known law of our universe. To suppress its constant genocidal rage, it is kept permanently submerged in a primary containment tank filled with 10,000 gallons of concentrated hydrochloric acid, which dissolves its flesh at the exact same rate it regenerates. Despite being subjected to thousands of pounds of TNT and high-energy orbital laser fire, the creature refuses to die. Its body doesn't just heal, it strategically evolves to counter specific threats in real time. During one failed termination attempt, 682 grew a series of layered crystalline scales harder than industrial diamond, allowing it to completely ignore the corrosive acid while it systematically slaughtered the entire containment team. It possesses an intelligence that far surpasses human strategic understanding, capable of neutralizing complex military tactics in a matter of seconds. The most terrifying aspect isn't its physical strength, but its sheer, unadulterated hatred for every living thing. When the Foundation finally managed to subdue it after a massive breach, the lead researcher asked the creature why it killed so many people. 682 stared back with cold, ancient eyes and spoke a single guttural sentence. They were disgusting. This entity is a grim reminder that some forces in this dark world simply cannot be broken. To dive deeper into the abyss of the SCP Foundation and other disturbing mysteries, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications for more Darkness Explained. Thank you for watching our journey into the unknown today. Let's just hope the reinforced glass holding back the nightmare does not shatter tonight.